improving supplier on-time delivery performance. And so for those customers for which you're working with existing products, whether that be make to order, engineer to order, distribution-based companies, if you have, if you're a product-based company, you're charged with the task of meeting your customer demands. The challenge against that, of course, is that supply chain disruption is prevalent in every industry, global and domestic today. It poses huge challenges in terms of being able to ship products to our customers on time and in full. All you need to do is open up the newspaper or a web browser or the TV to see evidence of the disruption that's going on, and it is rampant in every industry today. And so the key takeaway here is that we do not provide a silver bullet to fix all of those supply chain problems. However, in addition to some of the force majeure issues that companies are faced with, there's also the day-to-day challenges associated with purchase orders in terms of acknowledgement and change. And in fact, more than 50% of purchase orders will change over the course of their life cycle. And what most organizations are using to manage that today are phone communication, email, and spreadsheets. And so that's just not acceptable for most organizations today. Doesn't give you the accuracy or the speed, the velocity to accept those changes and have accurate communication between the buyers and suppliers. And so SourceDay is purpose-built to sit between your Epicor solution and your supplier network. So in addition to the purchase order changes that we need to make sure that we're confirming and accepting of those changes to price, quantity, and delivery, your on-time delivery performance is probably not 100% from your suppliers. In fact, if you're like most Epicor customers, that number is probably in the 65 to 90% range. The challenge with that, of course, is that you generally don't know which of those products are going to arrive on time. And so as a result, you build up your safety stock to account for those. And so there are two things that we're focused on. One is improving the communication with the suppliers so that our purchase order changes are captured in a timely fashion. And we're also looking to improve the accuracy so that we can potentially reduce our carrying costs associated with inventory evaluation. And so there are multiple value drivers associated with that. As evidence of our solution used in an Epicor environment today, I have one simple slide here for you as a customer case study. This is Chatsworth Products. They run Epicor ERP. They also run SourceDay, and they attribute these positive business outcomes to SourceDay. A 66% reduction in work in process inventory, 70% reduction in late supplier deliveries, and as a result of the reduction in WIP inventory, they're able to reclaim about 90% of their warehouse space, all attributable to the SourceDay solution working in conjunction with Epicor ERP. And then on the supplier side, the corresponding benefits also apply, right? Because your suppliers are dealing with some of the same challenges that you are in terms of working with email, phone, and spreadsheets to get updates on changes. And so this is a case study from the supplier's perspective. They're able to save 5 hours per week working with one of their SourceDay customers, and they're able to improve their relationship with their customer as a result. So instead of receiving, let's say, 50 emails with 50 different purchase orders, they're now using the SourceDay platform to consolidate those demand signals and respond in a timely fashion. So those are a couple of key elements from both the customer and the supplier perspective. On the supplier side, the key takeaway here is that SourceDay provides the onboarding, training, and support of 80% of a customer's direct spend. So as Epicor customers, 80% of your direct spend is probably made up of anywhere from 20 to 40% of your supplier base. We will guarantee supplier adoption because we recognize that without buy-in from the suppliers, any collaboration solution is destined to fail. And so currently our customers are experiencing about a 90% supplier adoption rate across the board. And then last but not least, there are 4 specific pillars of value impact that we can impact. Increased on-time delivery is one of those. We talked about that. Customer order protection. The takeaway here is that if we're not getting our products from our suppliers, we can't produce product, we can't ship, we can't invoice, and ultimately we can't recognize revenue. There are revenue targets that all companies have, and we want to try to protect those. And we recognize it's not a dollar for dollar relationship there, but some percentage of those late deliveries can be improved to help you protect more revenue. The inventory valuation and faster inventory turn ratios as a result of better communication with those suppliers results in lower inventory carrying cost. And then lastly, personal productivity. For the typical buyer using SourceDay, we're able to save them about 8 to 10 hours per week per buyer in terms of automation of some of those manual, mundane tasks that they engage in today. And so more evidence of that can be found through a business case analysis, which I'd be happy to engage in at the appropriate time. So now that I've kind of given you and set the stage for what it is SourceDay is purpose-built to do and the business challenges that we solve, I'll give you a quick glimpse of the user interface and how we might be able to leverage that to satisfy some of those business challenges that I made reference to a few moments ago. So I'll introduce you, and we'll start with the PO exceptions just so that for those folks, let's do one more thing here. For those folks that are currently using MRP, the key takeaway is that Epicor MRP will provide action messages for you to either expedite demand, delay demand as a result of relaxed demand coming from your customers, or cancel, right? So we've got move-ins, move-outs, and cancellations. Each one have a financial impact on your organization. Those can be summarized, and we can look at those through the lens of an executive dashboard. And then, of course, we can take action through the tactical execution of the buyer-supplier communication. And what do I mean by that? Well, when you create purchase orders inside of Epicor, whether it's Epicor ERP or P21, those purchase orders can be submitted, created and submitted just as they are today to your suppliers. But in addition, we have the ability to capture those purchase orders and translate them through the SourceDay platform. So instead of getting a single email for every purchase order, your suppliers will receive a consolidated email at a frequency with which you define. So for example, if you are working with a supplier and you cut 5 POs over the course of a morning, you can consolidate those and say, okay, this supplier is going to get messages twice daily. So they'll get one email in the morning and one in the afternoon, perhaps. It will consolidate and they'd be able to click on a link and open up their dashboard, which incidentally looks very, very similar to the buyer's dashboard that we're looking at here. So there's an equal and opposite relationship of rows and columns of information from which they can sort information, they can export, import, etc. So now that I've kind of set up the view, this is the result of purchase orders that are created through Epicor, submitted to a supplier. We are now pending purchase order acknowledgement from the supplier. So as a buyer, you'll notice in this case, in the upper left-hand corner, I'm logged in as a buyer. I am waiting for a response from my supplier for these 2 line items. Make note of the fact that it shows the purchase order line and release. And as I scroll to the right, I can see due dates, quantity ordered in comparison to quantity received, etc. Once those are acknowledged, I should also point out that there's an aging here, right? So the takeaway is we're submitting those for PO acknowledgement, and the supplier is receiving and acknowledging those purchase orders. Once they acknowledge those purchase orders, we'll be able to write that back to Epicor ERP at the PO header level, where today you're probably checking that box manually once you've spoken with your supplier. The other thing I want to point out here at a high level is just in the event that a supplier accepts the purchase order, but suggests some changes to price, quantity, and delivery. They would then use the platform to respond to the purchase order lines and releases. And you'll notice as I scroll to the right, if there is a quantity proposed change or a cost change proposed or a delivery change, those would be highlighted. And so now they're presented to the buyer for review. The buyer would either accept or reject those changes. And if they accept them, then SourceDay will automatically write the details of the change for the PO line and release back into the appropriate purchase order inside of Epicor ERP or P21. I'll pause there for just a moment because there's also an aging capability that enables the system to automatically trigger follow-up notifications to the supplier if they've failed to acknowledge a purchase order or an update to a purchase order in a timely fashion. You can set that up at the supplier level. So if you have suppliers overseas and you have a long lead time, you want to receive updates. If they haven't acknowledged a purchase order or a change within 3 days, for example, you can set your aging for 3 days and the system will automatically and proactively touch that supplier for an update. requesting them to update the appropriate data. And so the key takeaway here is that purchase orders are going to remain created inside of Epicor ERP, communicated through the platform to the supplier. Both buyers and suppliers have visibility to the same information, and there is proactive notification indicating to the supplier when some activity is required from them. At a very high level, I'll just also point out the fact that when we're waiting for a response for any changes that are suggested, we'll be able to see those here together with any notes that are applicable. Those notes can be added by either the buyer or the supplier and visible by the other. You can also see the history of a purchase order in chronological sequence. So the takeaway here is that over time, just like you can in Epicor, you can see those changes logged, who made the change, what was the date of the change, and of course the values that are associated with that. So a couple of key elements there that I wanted to quickly point out. And in the interest of time, I'll also jump over very quickly to some performance insights. So there may be some scorecarding requirements associated with the management of your suppliers. So within SourceDay, we aggregate the overall performance. So you can see across the entire supply base, some of the details that are associated with acknowledgements, responsiveness, and on-time delivery. And then down at the bottom, you'll notice individual scorecards for different suppliers, their current direct spend, using the platform, number of purchase orders and lines, et cetera. And then of course, an individual scorecard for each supplier. And so key takeaway here being that the supplier has visibility to the same performance metrics that you've exposed to them. Okay, so supplier scorecarding critically important today to be able to improve and foster better relationships. And then last but not least, I'll also point out the fact that another additive benefit of SourceDay above and beyond the extension of Epicor ERP is that when a supplier ships product, they're able to notify you as a customer of the shipment, what's in the shipment. You'll notice the ASN can be created and tracking numbers assigned. So an Epicor customer can click on the link and view the details of the tracking number or the corresponding ASN. You can see individual components that have been shipped. So you see that information in advance of receipt. And for those Epicor customers that are sending products in a value-added chain, so we buy raw material from one supplier and then we ship it to a secondary supplier, they add value and then ship back to our plant location. This is critically important because now we have visibility when it leaves from the raw material shop to the value-added service provider and then ultimately from there back to our shop. So multiple points of interest there that provide additive value above and beyond the standard Epicor solution. So I'm going to pause right there. I know I've jumped in late. I've tried to provide you with a glimpse of the business challenges that we solve, the user interface. I'm happy to go deeper in demonstration with anyone that might be interested in doing so, but based upon what we were able to show in this time slot, I want to open it up to general questions, recognizing we only have a couple of minutes left in the time that we've allotted. So Bill, I'm going to open it up to any general questions from the group at this point.
Yep, so you can just type those in. Okay, our first question is, when you say an ASN, is that EDI or is it loaded as a shipment directly into Epicor?
Great question. So EDI and SourceDay are mutually exclusive. You can use both in your environment. What we're talking about here is the ASN that's entered by the supplier. They would enter that into SourceDay, and then you have the ability to view a barcoded packing list as associated with that ASN. So it's not auto-loading into the receiving screen inside of Epicor ERP, although there is an import-export capability there. So you could potentially export an ASN with all of the line items and then import that into Epicor into the receipt entry screen. So in that case, you'd probably want to do that in an arrived status, pending receipt of the goods, and then throw the switch from arrived to receipt. I should also point out, based on my experience, I was a product expert for Epicor ERP for 15 years, so intimately familiar with that framework. So uniquely qualified to answer those types of questions.
Does that answer your question there, Graham? If not, just A right back in. We have another question from a Matt Heck. Is there any ability to show the SourceDay solution for AP and AR?
that we do have an AP solution for the for the ERP customers, and certainly we can provide a presentation on that. In fact, next week we'll be touching on AP. So the 20th, we're going to do another lunch and learn, and we're going to dive into the AP side. Having said that, on the AR, that's more on the customer-facing side. So our solution is entirely supplier focused.
All right. Any other questions? Again from Graham, hey, what does the quality module do?
Good question. So from a quality perspective, and typically for Epicor customers, quality is not utilized inside of SourceDay. If you're using even the standard Epicor quality, which would be the embedded quality where you have pass fail, you've got discrepant material reporting, I would continue to use that. The quality module inside of SourceDay is really intended for those customers that don't have quality inside of ERP. As you know, once you receive product inside of Epicor ERP, if it requires inspection, it'll go into a quarantine location, pending MRB review, et cetera. So that's all done inside of Epicor ERP. What we can do for those customers that are not using the embedded quality of Epicor is capture some high-level pass-fail information and some statistics to better support that initiative if you're not using quality inside of Epicor ERP.
Thanks, Jim.
Bet.
Is there any other questions? We still got a few minutes left here. Yeah, so the comment is, it would be nice to send the quality information back to the supplier.
Agreed, confirmed, and we can talk about some export capabilities to be able to do that. I mentioned the scorecarding. Those scorecarding measurements are more from a purchasing perspective than a quality perspective, but we do have some customers that are sending information back to suppliers through a export CSV type format. So yes, it can be done. It's not part of the standard product to push a button and push those quality metrics back. I should also point out on the tangential comment about the quality area is the fact that you do also have the ability to attach documents. So if there are specifications, packing instructions, design docs, what have you, those can be uploaded into SourceDay and accompany the purchase order, and it can be tied to the PO, the line, the release, and the item. And so with revision control, so if there is a need for revisions to be tracked and make sure that we're receiving product against an appropriate revision, we do have that capability as well.
Hey, Jim, I have a question. This is Bill. For those documents that are attached, are they stored strictly in the cloud with SourceDay, or is it possible to have them moved into the ERP, into the SQL database?
Good question. By default, they are stored in what we call source docs in the cloud, tied to the SourceDay records. So they would have to be uploaded to SourceDay in order to accompany the purchase orders. And we do that because there are certain customers, Epicor customers, that require some additional security. If there's aerospace defense type documents, certainly you don't want to just send them through a public cloud environment. And so you can upload those will be visible to both the buyer and the supplier in a bidirectional nature. So if the supplier uploads documents, they can be pushed to the buyer as well. You can download those files again. And we are, just to include a safe harbor statement here, we do have some development initiatives to automate some of the uploading of those documents. That'll probably happen sometime in 2022. So recognizing that inside of Epicor ERP, you can associate documents with a PO. Today, you would still have to upload those into SourceDay, but going forward, our plan is to have those documents that are attached to a PO inside of Epicor ERP automatically flow to the platform as well. Again, not available today, but on the roadmap.
And along those lines, I see another question from Matthew Heck asking, is there a government cloud compliant version of SourceDay's solution? Sounds like you already touched on that a little bit, Jim.
Yeah, and I wish there were. At the moment, there is not. I have worked with a number of aerospace companies in my career at Epicor. It's another thing that's on the roadmap. That is quite frankly just an investment that we need to make in order to support that industry. We're not quite there yet.
All right, we're just about at the end of our time, but if there's any more questions, pop them in. I can hang here for a few minutes. Jim, are you okay?
As can I, yes.
But if there's nothing else, as usual, if there are questions down the road, please just send an email to us here at Coda Bears. You can send it to Bill G at Coda Bears or to info at codabears.com. We'll be happy to follow up with Jim and put you in touch with SourceDay. Again, there is a further deeper dive into SourceDay next week. I'll be hosting it again with Jim on Wednesday of next week.
Thank you very much for your time, folks.
All right, everyone, have a great day.